I'm Sienna, 38 female. I live alone in a downtown condo that overlooks the city's skyline, a view I earned through years of disciplined work in the financial sector. My life is structured, quiet, and predictable, a stark contrast to the chaotic warmth and messy emotions of my family, who I've always tried to support from a comfortable distance. For years, I believed I was the silent benefactor, the reliable pillar they could lean on, never realizing that in their eyes, I wasn't a pillar at all, but a stepping stone they felt entitled to use. This is the story of how one cruel joke at a family birthday party revealed a lifetime of quiet contempt, and how I used the very tools of my trade to teach them a lesson about value, respect, and the true cost of family. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My relationship with money has always been different from my family's. They see it as something to be spent, enjoyed, and worried about later. I see it as a tool, a means of creating security, stability, and, most importantly, freedom. As a senior financial analyst, my entire career is built on forecasting risk and building robust structures to withstand it. I applied the same principles to my family. When my sister, Isabel, decided to pursue a career as a freelance graphic designer, I knew her income would be sporadic. While I admired her artistic passion, passion doesn't pay for a mortgage or braces. So I quietly became her safety net. It started small, covering a car repair bill she couldn't afford, paying for an emergency dental visit for her son, Ethan. Over the years, it grew. I co-signed the loan for her house because her credit wasn't strong enough. I paid for Ethan's private school fees when her freelance work dried up for a few months. Each time, Isabel would thank me with a flurry of heartfelt texts, calling me her guardian angel and the best sister in the world. I never asked for the money back. I simply categorized it in my mind as a long-term family investment. The biggest investment, however, was Ethan's future. Ethan is a bright kid, and from the time he was little, he talked about wanting to be an engineer. I saw his potential, and I also saw the financial strain my sister was constantly under. She and her husband had divorced years ago, and his child support payments were inconsistent at best. A top-tier engineering program was financially out of reach for her. So, when Ethan was 10 years old, I opened a custodial investment account in his name. I was the custodian, the sole manager of the funds until he turned 21. For 7 years, I diligently contributed a portion of my annual bonus to that account. I managed the portfolio, making strategic investments to ensure it grew at a steady pace. It was my secret project, a gift that I knew would change the trajectory of his life. I envisioned the day I would tell him and Isabel about it, perhaps at his high school graduation, and see the looks of shock and gratitude on their faces. The account was more than just money. It was my way of showing my love. It was my way of ensuring that at least one person in my family wouldn't have to face the same financial anxieties that plagued my sister and, in turn, my parents. My parents, Diana and Arthur, were simple people who had worked hard their whole lives only to end up with a modest pension. They lived comfortably but without extravagance. My mother, Diana, was the heart of the family, but her love was complicated. She adored Isabel, her firstborn, and Ethan, her only grandchild. They could do no wrong in her eyes. Isabel was the creative one, the free spirit. I was the sensible one, the practical one. In my family's language, sensible was a synonym for boring, and practical was code for unfeeling. My financial success wasn't seen as a product of hard work and sacrifice. It was treated as a sort of natural resource, like a well the family could draw from whenever they were thirsty. When I bought my condo, my mother's first comment wasn't of congratulations, but a sigh followed by, "It must be nice not to have to worry about bills." There was an undercurrent of resentment, a subtle narrative that my stability had come at the cost of being truly present or emotionally available. They didn't see the 16-hour days I pulled at the beginning of my career. They didn't see the vacations I skipped, the social events I missed. They only saw the result, a daughter who could write a check without flinching. and they grew to expect it. This dynamic became the unspoken foundation of our relationships. I was the provider, the problem solver. They were the recipients. I hosted every major holiday because my apartment was bigger and I could afford the catering. I paid for our annual family vacations, always boo. King the flights and hotels, I never complained. I thought this was my role, my contribution to the family. I loved them, and this was how I showed it. I wasn't as effusive or openly affectionate as Isabel, but I believed my actions spoke for themselves. The tuition account was the ultimate expression of this belief. It was silent, it was practical, and it was, I thought, an act of profound love. I never told my parents the exact amount in the account, but they knew I was putting something away for Ethan's college. To them, it was just another example of Sienna being Sienna. They didn't grasp the scale of it. They didn't understand that it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, a life-changing sum that I had carefully cultivated through market downturns and global uncertainties. To me, it was Ethan's key to the future. To them, it was just another extension of the family bank, a bank whose sole proprietor and only depositor was me. I was the architect of their security, working silently behind the scenes. I believed they were grateful. I thought they understood, on some level, what I was doing for them. The foundation I had built for them felt solid, unshakable. I had no idea it was built on sand, and the tide was about to come in. The setting for my world's collapse was, ironically, a celebration. It was my father's 70th birthday, and as usual, I had organized everything. I'd booked the private room at his favorite Italian restaurant, a cozy place with dark wood paneling and the scent of garlic and fresh bread hanging in the air. I'd coordinated with all his old friends and our extended family, ensuring everyone could make it. I'd even prepaid for the entire event, from the four-course meal to the open bar, so that no one, especially my parents, would have to think about the cost. I wanted the night to be perfect for my dad, a man of few words but deep kindness. He deserved a night where he felt celebrated and loved without any underlying stress. My sister, Isabel, had been tasked with one thing, the cake. It was a simple division of labor that seemed fair. I handled the complex logistics and the significant financial burden. She handled the one, symbolic, celebratory item. She had assured me it was all taken care of, a custom-ordered tiramisu cake from the best bakery in town. I arrived at the restaurant early to make sure everything was in order. The tables were set beautifully, the staff was briefed, and a small table in the corner was designated for gifts and the cake. An hour into the party, everything was going smoothly. My dad was beaming, surrounded by his friends, a glass of his favorite red wine in hand. I watched him from across the room, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. This was why I worked so hard, for moments like this, to be able to give my family experiences they couldn't otherwise afford. Isabel, Ethan, and my mother, Diana, arrived together, fashionably late as always. Isabel swept into the room, air-kissing relatives and laughing loudly, while Ethan, a typical 17-year-old, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, glued to his phone. My mother immediately began fussing over my father, straightening his tie and patting his arm. Isabel approached me, giving me a quick, one-armed hug. "Everything looks amazing, Sienna. You're a miracle worker," she said, her voice bright and breezy. "Did you bring the cake?" I asked, scanning her empty hands. Her face fell for a split second before a practiced smile replaced the look of panic. "Oh my gosh, I completely forgot it on the kitchen counter. Can you believe it?" "My brain is just mush these days," she laughed, as if forgetting the one task she was assigned for her father's 70th birthday was a charmingly quirky character trait. "Don't worry," she added quickly. "I'll run back and get it after dinner. No one will even notice." I felt a familiar flash of irritation but pushed it down. I wouldn't let it ruin the night. I simply nodded and told the restaurant manager we would be delaying the cake cutting. The dinner progressed, filled with laughter, toasts, and shared memories. As the main course plates were being cleared, my father stood up to say a few words. He thanked everyone for coming and then turned his attention to his family. He thanked my mother for her years of love and support. He spoke of his pride in Isabel's artistic talents and in his grandson Ethan, who was on the cusp of adulthood. Then he looked at me. "And to my Sienna," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My sensible, reliable daughter, thank you for all of this. You always take care of everything." He raised his glass to me and the room applauded. I felt a warm glow spread through my chest. Maybe they did see. Maybe they did appreciate it. That warmth, however, was short-lived. After my father's speech, the atmosphere became more relaxed. People mingled, and the conversation turned to the future, specifically Ethan S. My aunt asked him W. Here he was thinking of applying to college. Ethan, finally looking up from his phone, listed off a few prestigious universities known for their engineering programs. "Wow, ambitious," my uncle commented. "Those places cost a fortune." My mother, Diana, puffed up her chest with pride. "Oh, we're not worried about that," she announced to the table at large, her voice carrying across the room. "Sienna is taking care of all of it. She set up a special account for him years ago." A few relatives looked at me with impressed expressions. I gave a small, modest smile, feeling a bit uncomfortable with the public announcement, but also a little proud. This was my contribution, and I was happy for them to know it. Isabel chimed in, placing a dramatic hand on her heart. "Honestly, what would we do without her? She's our family's very own bank." Some people laughed, a light, appreciative sound. But then, Ethan, who had been listening with a smirk on his face, decided to add his own commentary. He pointed a finger directly at me from across the table and said, in a loud, clear voice, "Yeah, but Grandma says you're not really part of the family anyway." The statement hung in the air for a moment, sharp and stunningly cruel. He delivered it with the casual confidence of a teenager repeating a fun fact he'd recently learned. For a horrifying second, there was dead silence. Then, a few people tittered nervously, unsure if it was a joke. And then my mother, Diana, and my sister, Isabel, started to laugh. It wasn't a nervous chuckle. It was a genuine, full-throated laugh, as if Ethan had just delivered the punchline to the funniest joke in the world. The laughter was the sound of a bomb detonating in the silent, cozy restaurant room. It wasn't just Isabel and my mother. A few of my cousins, catching their cue, joined in. It was a wave of mirth that washed over the table, and I was the only one drowning. My father looked bewildered, his smile from his speech still frozen on his face as he tried to process what had just happened. My uncle and aunt exchanged an awkward glance, suddenly finding the ceiling fascinating. But the core of my family, my mother, my sister, and the grandson I was planning to put through college were laughing. They were laughing at the idea that I wasn't really one of them. Ethan, seeing the reaction he got, grinned proudly as if he'd just won a prize. It was in that moment, in the echo of their amusement, that a lifetime of small slights, of being taken for granted, of feeling like an outsider in my own home, coalesced into a single, brutal truth. They didn't just see me as different, they saw me as separate. I was a resource, a utility, a function, not a daughter, not a sister, not an aunt. The sensible one, the practical one, the family bank. All the names they had for me were roles, not relationships. My mind replayed Ethan's words. "Grandma says you're not really part of the family anyway." It wasn't just a child's unfiltered thought. It was a doctrine, a piece of family gospel passed down from the matriarch herself. My mother, Diana, the woman who was supposed to love me unconditionally, was the author of this narrative. She was the one teaching her grandson that his aunt, the woman funding his entire future, was an outsider. As their laughter continued, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The hurt was so profound, so deep, that it transcended tears and anger, landing somewhere cold and quiet. I looked at each of them, my mother wiping a tear of mirth from her eye, my sister shaking her head as if to say, "Oh, that boy," and Ethan basking in the attention, completely oblivious to the devastation he had just caused. I slowly folded my napkin, placed it on the table, and stood up. The laughter died down as all eyes turned to me. I looked at my nephew and gave him a small, tight smile. It wasn't a real smile, it was a mask, a piece of armor I put on. "That's quite a thing to say, Ethan," I said, my voice eerily steady. Then I looked at my mother and sister, and even funnier to hear. I turned to my father, who now looked deeply uncomfortable and ashamed. "Happy birthday, Dad. I'm sorry to leave early, but I'm not feeling well." It wasn't a complete lie. I felt sick to my stomach. Before anyone could react, I walked out of the private room, through the main restaurant, and into the cool night air. The sounds of the party, the clinking of glasses, and the low hum of conversation faded behind me. I didn't run, I walked with a deliberate, measured pace to my car. As I sat in the driver's seat, the dam broke. The cold calm shattered, and a wave of raw, agonizing pain washed over me. I didn't cry. Instead, I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, replaying the scene over and over in my head. The laughter, their smiling faces. It was a betrayal so complete, so casual, it felt surreal. For my entire adult life, I had shouldered their burdens. I had sacrificed my time, I and my own desires to ensure their comfort and security. I had naively believed that my actions constituted a form of love that they recognized, even if they didn't praise it. I thought we were a unit, bound by blood and mutual, if unspoken, affection. That illusion was now shattered. I wasn't their family, I was their sponsor. And a sponsor, I realized with chilling clarity, can withdraw their funding at any time. The drive home was a blur. My mind, trained to analyze data and identify patterns, was now working on a different kind of problem. It was sifting through years of memories, reevaluating them in the harsh light of this new revelation. Every "thank you, you're a lifesaver" from Isabel now sounded hollow, tinged with the calculation of a transaction. Every time my mother said, "You can afford it," it no longer felt like a simple observation, but a statement of entitlement. It was a pattern of behavior I had willfully ignored for years, choosing to believe in a version of my family that simply didn't exist. I had been paying for a subscription to a club that had never truly accepted me as a member. They let me pay the fees, enjoy the occasional perk of my generosity, but when it came down to it, my name wasn't on the roster. When I got back to my silent, empty condo, the view of the city lights felt different. It no longer felt like a symbol of my success, but a reflection of my isolation. I had built this life for myself alone, and it was a life they couldn't comprehend or respect. They only understood what they could take from it. The pain was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but something else was beginning to form alongside it. Resolve. A cold, hard resolve that felt as solid and unyielding as the steel beams of the skyscrapers outside my window. They had laughed. They thought my role in this family was a joke. I decided then and there that the punchline was going to be on them, and it wouldn't be funny at all. The night after the party was sleepless. I sat in my home office, the glow of my monitors casting long shadows on the wall, and I did what I do best. I analyzed the data. The subject of my analysis was no longer a stock portfolio or a market trend. It was the financial entanglement of my family, an ecosystem I had single-handedly created and sustained. I started by pulling up every transaction, every transfer, every bill I had ever paid on their behalf. I built a spreadsheet, a ledger of my one-sided generosity. The numbers were staggering. It wasn't just the big things, like the down payment assistance for Isabel's house or the private school tuition. It was the constant, dripping faucet of everyday expenses. The car insurance I covered for Isabel because she had a tough month. The plane tickets for my parents to visit their friends in Florida every winter. The new laptop for Ethan because his old one was too slow for his schoolwork. It was thousands of dollars every year, tens of thousands over the last decade. It was a shadow salary for my sister and a pension supplement for my parents, all flowing from my accounts, no questions asked. Seeing it all laid out in black and white, quantified in neat columns and calculating sums, removed the emotion and replaced it with stark, irrefutable fact. This wasn't support, it was subsidization. I wasn't helping them stand on their own feet. I was the ground beneath them, and they had forgotten how to stand on their own. But the financial audit was only part of the story. I needed to understand the why. Why the contempt? Why the casual cruelty? Ethan's words were a symptom, but my mother was the source. I needed to understand the narrative she had been spinning. My investigation became less about numbers and more about memories, about words I had previously dismissed. I thought back to countless family gatherings. I remembered offhand comments my mother would make. Sienna is so focused on her career, she doesn't have time for a family of her own. Don't bother Sienna with this, she's busy with important work things. It's different for Sienna, she doesn't have a child to worry about. She had spent years painting a portrait of me as a cold, distant workaholic, emotionally disconnected from the real things in life, like marriage and children. My success wasn't a source of pride for her. It was a deviation from the life she understood and valued. Isabel, with her artistic temperament and her son, fit neatly into my mother's worldview. I, with my spreadsheets and my solitude, did not. My financial contributions weren't seen as acts of love because, in her mind, I was incapable of that kind of real family love. Therefore, the money had to be something else. An obligation, a tax on my otherness, or perhaps a clumsy attempt to buy my way into a family I couldn't belong to organically. The most painful realization came when I started looking through old emails and text messages. I searched for conversations about Ethan's tuition fund. I found an email from Isabel from 2 years ago after I'd informed her that the fund had passed a significant milestone. Her reply was effusive. "You are literally the best sister and aunt on the planet. Ethan is so lucky to have you." But then I cross-referenced the date. Just a week later, she had posted a series of photos on social media from a spontaneous weekend trip to a luxury spa with her FR. Eanes, the caption read, "Treating myself because I deserve it. Self-care, work hard, play hard." The money she saved by not having to worry about her son's education wasn't being used to build her own safety net. It was funding a lifestyle she couldn't afford. My support wasn't a bridge to her stability. It was a hammock for her leisure. I was enabling her financial irresponsibility. Then I remembered a phone call from 6 months ago. My mother had called me, her voice laced with manufactured panic. My father's property taxes were due, and their pension check was late. She went on and on about how they might lose the house. I, of course, immediately transferred the $5,000 to cover it. Now, driven by a new and ugly suspicion, I logged into the county's public records website. I looked up their property. The taxes had been paid on time, a full month before she had called me. She had lied. She had invented a crisis to extract money from me, money that likely went towards something far less urgent. A new patio set, perhaps, or a cruise she'd mentioned wanting to take. The pieces clicked into place, forming a mosaic of manipulation and deceit. They hadn't just taken me for granted, they had been actively exploiting me. They had created a narrative in which I was the odd one out, the emotionless ATM, to justify their reliance on me. If I wasn't really family, then it wasn't emotionally complicated to take my money. It was just a transaction. My generosity was recast as my duty. My silence was interpreted as consent. My love was completely and utterly misunderstood. The entire system was built on a foundation of my perceived otherness. It was a carefully constructed lie that allowed them to benefit from my hard work while simultaneously holding me in contempt for the very life that made it possible. The laughter at the party wasn't a sudden, spontaneous event. It was the culmination of years of private jokes and whispered conversations. It was the moment the mask slipped, the moment their carefully constructed private narrative spilled out into the open. The investigation was complete. I had followed the money and found a trail of entitlement. I had followed the murmurs and found a chorus of disrespect. The data was in, and the conclusion was undeniable. A correction was long overdue. The rage I expected to feel never quite materialized. Instead, after a night of forensic accounting of my own life, I was left with a profound and chilling sense of clarity. Emotions are messy, but numbers are pure. The data told a story of imbalance, and my job was to correct the market. My family had been operating under the assumption that I was an infinite resource with zero emotional cost. My goal was now to introduce them to the concepts of scarcity and consequences. My plan wasn't born from a desire to inflict pain, but from a need to restore a sense of order and justice to my own life. It was a financial recalibration. The first and most significant asset to be addressed was Ethan's tuition fund. It was the largest single investment I had made in my family's future, and it was the one most directly tied to the events of that night. It was the very fund my mother had boasted about just moments before her grandson announced my exile from the family. The irony was so thick I could taste it. That morning, after a few hours of fitful sleep, I sat down at my desk, a cup of black coffee in hand. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the city, and the world felt quiet, holding its breath. I logged into my brokerage account. There it was, Ethan J. Miller Custodial Account. The balance was just over $482,000. It was a beautiful number, the result of 7 years of disciplined investing, of weathering market volatility, of believing in a future that I now knew was a fantasy. As the custodian of the account, I had complete legal control over the funds until Ethan turned 21. I could withdraw, reinvest, or even close the account at my discretion, as long as the funds were theoretically for the beneficiary's welfare. I considered what his welfare truly meant. Was it his welfare to be handed a future he felt entitled to without any understanding of the sacrifice it required? Was it his welfare to be raised by a mother and grandmother who taught him that disrespect has no consequences? I decided it wasn't. His true welfare required a lesson in reality. I opened the account management tab. The options were all there: transfer, withdraw, close account. I navigated to the liquidation page. The system asked me to confirm that I wanted to sell all holdings in the portfolio. The stocks, the bonds, the mutual funds, all of it. I clicked confirm. The next page asked where the liquidated cash should be transferred. I entered the account number for my own personal high-yield savings account, the one I used for my own long-term goals. Another confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to proceed? I stared at the screen. For a long moment, this wasn't just a financial transaction. It was the severing of a cord, the demolition of a bridge. It was the final, irreversible acknowledgement that the family I thought I had was gone. I took a deep breath and clicked the final confirm. A small green checkmark appeared on the screen with the message, "Your request has been processed. Funds will be transferred within 1-3 business days." I closed the laptop. There was no sense of triumph, just a quiet, somber finality. It was done, but that was only step 1. The tuition fund was the headline act, but the network of smaller, recurring subsidies needed to be dismantled as well. I logged into my online banking portal. I went to the bill pay section. I found the recurring monthly payment for Isabel's car insurance. I clicked delete. I found the cell phone bill for the family plan that I paid for, which included my parents and Isabel. I logged into the provider's website and initiated a transfer of liability for their lines. They would now be responsible for their own bills. The process took 20 minutes. Click, delete, confirm. Next, I went to my credit card accounts. Isabel was an authorized user on one of my cards, a for emergencies only card that she used with alarming frequency for non-emergencies. I found her name under the Account Management tab and clicked Remove Authorized User. Her card would be declined the next time she tried to use it. Finally, I thought about the house I had co-signed for. This was more complex. Removing my name from a mortgage isn't a simple click. It requires refinancing, which Isabel could never qualify for on her own. For now, my name would have to remain, but I made a note to consult my lawyer. I would not be the financial backstop for her home if she ever defaulted. The risk I had willingly taken on for my sister was a risk I was no longer willing to bear for a stranger who lived in my house. By 8:00 a.m., I had systematically and silently dismantled the entire financial support structure I had built for my family over 15 years. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't sent an angry text, I hadn't made a dramatic announcement. I had simply turned off the tap. They wouldn't know it yet. They would wake up, go about their morning, completely unaware that the safety net that had always been beneath them had been removed, but they would find out. The first sign of trouble would likely be an email notification from the college fund's brokerage firm, an alert sent to the secondary email address on file, Isabel's. It would inform her that the account status had changed. And then, the new reality would begin to dawn. I looked at my phone. It was still silent. The storm was coming. I had battened down the hatches and was waiting for it to make landfall. The silence lasted until 8:51 a.m. It was a Tuesday morning and I was in a virtual meeting with my team discussing quarterly projections. My phone, set to vibrate on my desk, began to buzz. I glanced at the screen. It was Isabel. I ignored it and focused back on the presentation. It buzzed again. And again, a frantic, insistent rhythm. I watched out of the corner of my eye as her name flashed on the screen repeatedly. The calls were coming in back-to-back, without pause. The moment one call went to voicemail, the next one was already dialing. It was a digital tantrum. My team members on the video call were oblivious. I maintained a calm, professional demeanor, asking a question about emerging market trends while my phone vibrated like a trapped insect. By the time the meeting ended at 9:15 a.m., I had 22 missed calls from my sister and a string of increasingly unhinged text messages. The first few were confused. "Sienna, call me." I got a weird email about Ethan's account, followed by, "What's going on? I can't log in." Then the panic set in. "Did you move the money? Call me right now." And finally, the rage. "I swear if you've done what I think you've done, you will regret this for the rest of your life." There was also a missed call from my mother, Diana, and one from my father, Arthur. I imagined the scene at my sister's house. Isabel, staring in disbelief at a zero balance, my mother wringing her hands beside her, both of them working themselves into a frenzy of indignation. I let them stew. I made myself another cup of coffee, walked over to my window, and watched the city traffic flowing smoothly below. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of lightness. The crushing weight of their expectations, their entitlement, was gone. I was no longer responsible for their choices, their futures, or their feelings. I drank my coffee slowly, deliberately. I decided I would answer the next time Isabel called. I didn't have to wait long. At 9:25 a.m., my phone rang again. I let it ring 3 times before answering, putting it on speakerphone and placing it on my desk. "Hello, Isabel," I said, my voice calm and even. The sound that came through the speaker was not a greeting. It was a shriek, a raw, guttural sound of pure fury. "What did you do?" "I'm not sure what you mean," I replied, my tone deliberately neutral. "Don't you dare play dumb with me. Ethan's tuition money, it's gone, all of it. Where is it, Sienna?" "It's safe," I said simply. "It's in my account." Your account? Your account? That's ETHAN's money. You stole your nephew's future." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She screamed and sobbed, a torrent of accusations and insults. I was a monster. I was jealous. I was bitter because I didn't have a family of my own. And then came the line I had been waiting for. "You're heartless." I let her rage wash over me, listening patiently until she finally paused to take a breath. The silence stretched for a moment before I spoke, my voice still quiet but now edged with steel. "Heartless," I repeated, tasting the word. "That's an interesting choice of words. Let's talk about what's heartless, Isabel." I continued before she could interrupt. "Heartless is teaching your son that the aunt who has paid for his private school, his medical bills, and his entire future is not really part of the family. Heartless is laughing when he says it to her face in a room full of people. Heartless is fostering a culture of disrespect for the person who has been your financial lifeline for over a decade." I could hear her sputtering on the other end, but I kept going. "That money wasn't Ethan's. It was mine. It was a gift I was planning to give, a gift predicated on the idea that we were a family who loved and respected one another. The party on Saturday made it crystal clear that we are not. You don't get to mock the family bank and then be surprised when it closes its doors." Suddenly, another voice was on the line. It was my mother. "Sienna, this has gone far enough," she screeched, having evidently grabbed the phone from Isabel. "You are punishing a child for a silly joke. You are ruining his life over nothing. I demand you put that money back right now." "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice turning colder still. "I'm not punishing a child for a joke. I am responding to a sentiment that you created. Grandma says you're not really part of the family." Those were his words, your words. "Did you really think you could poison your grandson against me and I would still be happy to hand you $500,000? Did you think my money came without my feelings attached? You've always been too sensitive," she cried. "And you have always been too entitled," I shot back. "For years, you have all treated me like an ATM and I let you. That was my mistake. But the service is now permanently disconnected. Ethan's college education is now Isabel's responsibility. I suggest she starts updating her portfolio because those prestigious engineering schools are, as my uncle pointed out, very expensive." I could hear Isabel wailing in the background. My mother was speechless for a moment, then she tried a different tactic. "What about your father? This will break his heart. My father's heart was already broken on Saturday night when he had to watch his wife and eldest daughter laugh at his youngest daughter's public humiliation, I said. And speaking of Dad, his birthday gift is on its way. I've set up a trust that will deposit a small sum into his personal account each month for his hobbies. It's in his name only, so you and Isabel can't touch it. That's my final family contribution. And with that, I hung up. The silence in my apartment was absolute. The phone did not ring again. The confrontation was over. The shockwave had hit, and now there was only the aftermath. The weeks that followed the phone call were a study in silence. The constant stream of texts, calls, and emails from my family, which had been the background noise of my life for years, ceased completely. It was as if a switch had been flipped. I was excommunicated. There were no more pleas, no more apologies, no more angry demands. There was just a vast, echoing quiet. At first, it was jarring. I'd find myself instinctively checking my phone for messages that weren't there. But soon, the quiet transformed from an absence into a presence. It became peace. It became freedom. I realized how much of my mental and emotional energy had been consumed by them, worrying about Isabel's finances, anticipating my mother's next passive-aggressive comment, planning and paying for events designed to make them happy. With that burden lifted, I had space to breathe, to think about what I wanted. About a month later, I received a letter from a lawyer. Isabel was attempting to sue me for Ethan's tuition money, claiming I had a fiduciary duty and that the funds were an irrevocable gift. I forwarded it to my own lawyer, who I had already consulted. His response was swift and reassuring. As the custodian of a UTMA account, I had broad discretion. Given the circumstances of emotional manipulation and the fact that Ethan was still a minor, her case was incredibly weak. He drafted a response so sharp and legally airtight that we never heard from her lawyer again. The attempt, however, was telling. Her first instinct wasn't reflection or remorse, it was litigation. It was the final confirmation that I had made the right decision. My father was the only one who reached out. He called me about 2 weeks after the incident. His voice was tired and heavy with sadness. "I'm sorry, Sienna," he said. "For what happened? For all of it, I should have said something." "It's okay, Dad," I replied, and I meant it. My father was a passive man, caught between 3 strong-willed women. I couldn't blame him for not knowing how to navigate the storm. We talked for a long time, more than we had in years. I told him about the trust I'd set up for him, and he cried. They were quiet tears of gratitude. We made plans to have lunch, just the 2 of us, the following week. It was the beginning of a new kind of relationship with him, one built not on obligation or grand gestures, but on simple, genuine connection. The money from the tuition fund sat in my savings account, accruing interest. I didn't touch it for 6 months. I needed to separate it from its painful history and decide what its new purpose would be. It was no longer about securing a future for someone who didn't respect me. It was about honoring the hard work and sacrifice that created it in the first place. I decided to split it. A portion went into my own retirement fund, bolstering my own future security. Another portion I used to start a scholarship foundation in my father's name for underprivileged students hoping to pursue degrees in STEM fields. I wanted the money to go to young people who would understand its value, who wouldn't see it as an entitlement but as a life-changing opportunity. The rest, I used it to live. I took the vacations I'd always postponed. I cut back my hours at work slightly, trading a bit of income for more time. I invested in myself. As for Isabel and Ethan, I heard snippets of news through the family grapevine via my father. Isabel had been forced to take on a full-time job with a corporate marketing firm. Her freelance dreams were put on hold, replaced by the reality of needing a steady paycheck and benefits. Ethan did not go to a prestigious engineering university. He was attending a local community college, presumably with plans to transfer to a state school later. He was working a part-time job to help pay for it. I don't know if he ever learned the full story, or if he understood the consequences of his joke. Perhaps one day he will. I don't harbor any hatred for them. What I feel is a profound sense of detachment, as if I'm reading about characters in a book whose lives no long. Intersect with mine. My definition of family has changed. It's no longer about blood or obligation. It's about mutual respect, support, and love. My family is now the circle of close friends I've cultivated over the years, the ones who celebrate my successes without resentment. It's my quiet lunches with my father. It's the letters of gratitude I receive from the scholarship recipients. I am still the sensible one, the practical one, but I am no longer the family bank. My assets are my own, and I invest them wisely in people who understand their true worth. And my life, once a quiet support system for others, is now a vibrant, thriving entity of its own. I am, finally, a full member of my own family.